Good afternoon, Professor Bode Omojola. So it's quite a huge privilege, to host Professor Omojola. In the last 30 years, many of you know, even before 30 years, 40, let's say 40, 45 years ago, Professor Omojola has been quite prominent in terms of a particular conversation that was not at the forefront of scholarly discourse in Nigeria. I'm talking about from mid-80s down, late 80s down to early 90s. And that's discourse of, Nigerian people doing classical music in their own ways. Of course, the practice has a long-standing history in Nigeria, dating back to late 19th century, from the church and all stuff like that. But the real scholarship on this type of practice or composition commenced, at least, I think it's 1989, through your dissertation, where it curated, and tried to define, the ways in which we can conceptualize this history. And that work today has not only created a kind of framework for doing that kind of work, which I will get to shortly. But in 1995, a seminar work, it's now a seminar work, emerged from that dissertation. And of course, the popular Nigerian art, the book with the ash cover. From the mid-1990s till date, the book has actually did a lot, which is the focus of this conversation. So in the last 9 months, we've had dedicated reading section, reading Professor Omojola's book, that book published in 1995, Nigerian Art Music. But first of all, I want everyone to stand. The focus of today is to celebrate this man, to thank him for that book. Thank him. So let's clap for him. Thank you so much, Prof. Thank you. So you can sit.
Thank you, Ayo, for that excellent embarrassment.
Oh. Yeah, look, to put it in a very simple word, that book was and still a path-breaking book. From the late 80s down to early 90s, the scholarship, particularly in West Africa, and let's say Nigeria, was following a kind of transformative turn. By that, I mean different powerful scholars that we know at the time couldn't work together, couldn't agree. Professor Agawu rehearsed their attention in ways in which they have disagreed with themselves on the public space in a particular journal of Ilam. So from that page, you could see the ways in which this power balance was happening in Nigeria at the time. This happened from the late 1970s down to the early 80s. What was the power imbalance? The field of ethnomusicology, those who card carriers look like musicologists, believe that for you to do musicology, you need to be there. What? How? What? You need to go there. And those theorists who also want to write about their own culture says, no, you don't need to go to the culture. Like the argument we've been having, like the last of Ekweme, it's enough for you to just listen and just write. So it was a tension for many years. But his work came in the early 90s and brought the two perspectives together. If you have read that book very well, you will see there's a subtle mix of musicological approach, ethnomusicological approach, and even to some extent, theoretical representations. You could see that. So that was a path breaking. It was a path because before that time, Nigerian scholars could not agree. But after that book, people started using the format of the book to do whatever they want to do. You know all the works around. Of course, it did not totally solve the problem. But what it does in that sense was simply that it mediated a framework from which people can refer to. Okay, if you belong to composition, musicology, there's a framework. But since then, the book has been, significant in Nigerian musicological discourse. And that's why in most scholars, in most spaces across Nigeria, you see that model. Although The question is, if the model is well represented, that's another conversation. But that model savaged that tension at the time. It brought Nigerian music scholarship. It provided a direction that people still follow, use until tomorrow or today, But that's just by a kind of context. So then the question is, and so what? Like I used to tell people, some of my friends and colleagues here, and so what after all the research question, and why must we listen to you? In this case, it's so important because 30 years ago the book was published, and generations of scholars have emerged from that kind of, it was not just about the book, it was about the ideology inherent and framework in that book that people, in one way or the other, either consciously or passively, has used and imbibed, embodied, and reproduced generations of scholars, including myself and many people seated here today. So for that reason, I think it's worth it for us to dedicate moments like this, perhaps once in 2 years, to spotlight people who have done that kind of foundational work. So thank you so much, Prof. We sincerely appreciate that effort. I could imagine what you went through going to archive to go and look for Fela Showande, look for Zogwe, and bring in almost 500, in that book actually, almost 200 analyses, because a lot of analysis went on from different people. And I also know the chapter 2 or 3 or 4, there was a kind of anthology of composers to that moment. I remember the last few names, I could mention them. Samuel Amushon, Godwin Sado. Yeah, this is 1995. So the question is, from 1995 to now, we've had great names. Greater names have even, big names have emerged. Many of them are here with us. Many of them are online, of course. That's a conversation for another day. But what's important today, Prof.
Finally.
Yeah. I have just 3 questions for you, because I really want you to tell us. So, what actually, led you to that part of that kind of research? Because the initial research part was you are either a music theorist or ethnomusicology, because the school of thought was, the demarcation was so clear. The school of Laze Kwame and his followers, then the likes of Samuel Akwabot, and their own followers. In fact, there's another in-between school of thought, the artistic scholars, like the likes of Akinwuba, who they combine everything. Ayo Bankole, that generation also, they have their own. But until that moment, no scholars has been able to bring them together and merge all these multifaceted space. So what actually led you to that? Why didn't you do composition alone or ethnomusicology? Why did you, why? What was motivation at the time?
Thank you very much. Once again, thank you for this opportunity to come here and reflect on Nigerian art music. Actually, I will start from when I was an undergraduate at Nsukka.
Great lion.
Great lion. And I think I was in my second year, and I felt that we should begin to bring people together. You won't believe it. I started the first Association of Nigerian Music Students at Nsukka. Yeah. But it was a local branch. It was Nsukka branch, And I wrote letters to Professors Kwame, Akpabot, and so on and so forth. Some 10, 15 years later, when I enrolled at African Studies in Ibadan, Akpabot came to class with my letter that he had received like 10, 15 years ago, and read it. He said, "This Omojola, it looks like you're a little bit tough, So after the Nsukka thing, then I started writing to other campuses to try to start a national association, That was the background for my decision, working with some colleagues, to start what today is ANIM. We started it in 1993.
You can do it, please.
It's a story that people may want to suppress, Yeah. So in 1993, I invited people to Ilorin, Lazi Kweme, Mekinzewi. Lazi Kweme gave the keynote address. Mekinzewi brought his drums. Christian Onyegi, who is now the president of ANIM, was at Ilorin. And then we started, and we formed the Musicological Society of Nigeria. Why did the name change? When we went to Abuja to register it, they said it was too close to Muson. So that was how it came. At that time, I had left for the US. Femi Abiodun coordinated, and then it became Association of Nigerian Musicology. So the word musicology, I could say that I was among the first people who used that word, musicology, not ethnomusicology. So I was so happy that the people that came after me, they've been wonderful, because one thing is to have a baby, the other thing is to have people who will, take care of the baby. And they've been doing an excellent job. And they retained that musicology. And people like Mrs. Omibi, because late Mrs. Omibi, Professor Mrs. Omibi, because of our experience at California, also encouraged musicology. So that unique identity. So when I was listening to the professor from South Africa yesterday,
Mapaya.
Mapaya, talking about African musicology, I was so happy to hear that. So that was a little bit of a digression. I told you, briefly during my keynote a couple of days ago, that how I ended up studying the works of Nigerian composers was a personal thing. When I got to Leicester, and for the first time, I realized that I was an outsider to art music, the way we practice it in Nigeria. We play the piano, we do Chopin, we analyze fugue, and so on and so forth. But I got to England and realized that, this is not your thing. This is not your thing. So I went to my professors and said I was changing from historical musicology to studying the works of Nigerian composers. And they were Nigerian composers. I was able to get some scores. I was in touch with Akinyuba. Actually, Akinyuba came to London, gave me some scores. Akpabot gave me his scores. And then they realized they didn't know that there was such a thing. It could be that my specific professors were not enlightened, But they were surprised, They liked them. They liked Bankole, they liked Yuba, they liked, So that was how I wrote my PhD thesis on Nigerian art music. Kofi, identity is very big in that title. Am I allowed to continue? Okay. So the title is Compositional Style and African Identity, a study of the works of Nigerian composers. So I did Uzoegwe, Akpabot, Yuba, Chowande, Kweme, all of them. So now, when I came back to Nigeria, I was teaching at Ilorin, and I got to meet IFRA, French Institute for Research in Africa. And then they commissioned me. They were interested in publishing the book, but they said I needed to go to Ghana and conduct some research, because IFRA was serving West Africa, actually West Africa and Southern Africa, so that I should do something. So that's why you see an introductory study to Ghana, So I interviewed Nketia, I interviewed Amun's daughter. I actually saw a concert in honor of Amun at the National Theatre, and I think you gave the keynote address. Yeah, we've been together for a long time. So the Nigerian art music was just a small section of the thesis. And Christopher Oyesheku and his wife, they were in Ibadan, so there was this publisher called African Book, yeah, exactly. So they were the ones who produced the book, although it was published in the name of IFRA. So it's a very tiny part of the book. And somehow, it looks like, I went to Chicago for a study, and we're on a table, Africans, and almost half of them said, we've read your book. we've shared your book. Oh, okay. I felt so good about that people are reading the book. So people are still reading the book. By the way, that book is available open
access.
Yeah, so you can get it free online.
You can download it
book.
online.
You can
free.
download everything. So that's the way it is. The issue of a kind of conflict of identity. Who am I? So I started asking questions. And then when I interviewed these other composers, I realized they too had a similar problem. So they all came back to do ethnographic research. Akpabot went to Ibibio, Ekweme did Igbo music, Akinyuba did Dudu drumming. All of them came back and began to study the music. Most importantly, not from an anthropological perspective, but from an analytical perspective. They wanted to know the music. They wanted to see what they can do in the music, in their own composition. So composition became a way of kind of providing some kind of psychological relief. So it's an expression of a personal experience, one that has been shaped by this conflict that colonialism brought. It's a pity that we cannot shy away from still referring to colonialism. But you can see that they have expressed themselves differently. Look at the music of Ekweme. It tends to be tonal, at times modally inflected. Look at the music of Samakabot. It tends to be tonal, although in his Verba Christi, which Grace discussed yesterday, he mixed atonality with tonal passages, with modal passages. I guess that's one of the inspirations for my own work. So different kinds of things. At times it's like, let me just write my experience in terms of multiple pitch systems. A pitch system that tonality interrupted. So one way that people have been reacting is to express themselves in a way that you can. It may not be musically organic. At times it's like juxtaposed styles, that there is no organic connection. But that is usually possible when it's a cantata or an opera, If you look at Ayo Bankoli's piano sonata number, the one, The Passion, you could see the way that what I want to describe as the fragmented form of one of the movements. It's supposed to be a sonata form. The typical section, exposition, development. But because Ayo Bankole had so much musical emotions going on within him, he wanted to put everything there. So that's the sense in which an extra musical motivation engaged with structural form. And structural form relaxed itself for a kind of a program, So different ways that people write their music. Akinyuba, he went straight for some of the compositions that we later know Akinyuba by were written as a student, I think he was the most radical before Joshua Uzegwe came in. If you look at these different pieces, since from traditional life, you could see a tonality moderated by serialism, moderated by African drum language. So you see these layers of identity fighting for existence in the music. So there's always this sense of different musical expressions, emotions, histories, struggling to find a place in a very tensed musical space. Then you can also go to self-taught composers, somebody like Harcourt White, who encountered tonal music not through formal education, but as he was stricken with leprosy, so he went to the Methodist center where he was being healed. That was where he came across tonal harmony, but he didn't have education. He wasn't trained. He just sang those songs, and then he began to put together his own music. So you see, tonal harmony destroyed through indigenous Igbo modal system. So all the rules of harmony were broken in a productive manner. Because when you listen to the music, it's good. It's good. You know, the lexical relationships that define tonal harmony, they disappeared. Who cares? People enjoy the music, you know. So I could go on and on and on and on, just to say that we have this multifaceted responses to the impact of colonial rule. It's usually a personal expression based on the experiences that they have. And I think that's one of the things that Nigerian art music book helps to establish. Let me stop here so that I don't become Ayo.
Oh.
Just kidding.
Thanks, sir. Thanks so much, Prof. Now, 30 years on, we've seen generations of scholars, particularly composer, and in 1994, 1995, what was at the time brewing, of course, the likes of, I want to mention name now, from the, let's say in the late 80s, some generation were coming up. I'm talking about the likes of Ayo Oluranti, the likes of the OAJs, of course. Maybe some of you might not know, the OAJs is also a composer, it's also a good, fantastic one. That's another conversation. Yeah, so the OAJs were coming up, you see, those years. But they didn't make it into your book because they were still brewing.
Were they born?
Yeah.
No. Waity. So, Sheung, should I put you on the spot? 1983, where were you? Oh, okay, you're not that, okay. But you weren't composing then? No. So the scores were not there. Remember that the book came from the PhD thesis.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I should have expanded it, but then that would mean conducting new research. IFRA wanted to get that book out. So that's the only reason. But I can assure you, I'm working on a bigger project right now. And Seun, I promise you. Ayo, we may be arguing and disagreeing, but your music is in that book. And a few other people, you know. Still, I'm not able to cover everybody because there has to be a limit, you know. But in fact, I have been presenting papers. The one conference that I attended in Freiburg, which focused on global art music, global art song. My presentation was on Seun at that conference, you know. So, because if you keep doing what you're doing, the world is changing, you don't change with them, you'll be forgotten. So I don't want myself to become irrelevant. I say, Seun, come on, let's talk about your music, you know.
So what would you say has changed in terms of the art music landscape that you explore from, let's say, early 80s down to mid-90s when the book was published, and 1990s to 2025? What few things that you think?
It has expanded. The typologies have expanded. And it becomes more hierarchical. Because before, all those composers that I mentioned had a similar kind of education. Still, we saw diversity in what they were doing. But in terms of privilege, in terms of exposure to solid education, because whatever you are doing, you must master the technique. That's important. So they had that exposure. They all went to, the trend was they will all go to England, so they all went to England, Guildhall School of Music, Royal College of Music, Trinity College of Music, Guildhall School of Music and Drama. They went there, got their FCTL or LCTL, and because there was maybe not much music education in Nigeria, so they just went to those schools. Then some of them came back. When they came back, where would they work? no music, in school, so they went to broadcasting. So Ayabankwale, Akinyuba, all of them went to broadcasting. Then after a while, they now departed for the United States, So they were kind of privileged. But since then, things have become more, as I said before, a greater level of hierarchy, different kinds of experiences, different kinds of proficiency. So the field has expanded. I don't know whether lateral expansion is matched by vertical depth of engagement with the musical material. I don't think so. So that's one of the things. Then we began to see people like Oluranti, people like Sheung, in the East, people like Christian Onyeji, who was inspired by Akinyuba's African pianism. Professor Kofi read some of the lines of Akinyuba yesterday about instruments, So what Onyeji has done is to focus on drumming, and then coined his own drumistic theory, which I count as an affiliate of Akinyuba's African pianism. And I think he too has expressed this. So we have more composers. I don't have a list of all names. Many of them doing excellently well, building on what the predecessors had done. But then a lot motivated maybe more by excitement than technical facility. But we have many more works going on now. As I believe that the more people write, then quality will emerge, and people will learn from what other people are doing.
Thank you so much, Rob. Yeah, but one question, we are coming back to this 30 years distance and the involvement of Nigerian art music. But quickly, there's something I also want to talk about briefly. It's also in the last 30 years also, you've also been acting, though Prof is not a card carrier composer like that, but Prof is a composer in the sense that he's a composer, but he's not, how do I put it now? Maybe
I will put it when I talk.
Yeah, but you've been able to balance scholarship on the one hand, and also artistic activities, composing, not just composing, something serious, like big operas, things that are even also redefining the notion of opera.
Yeah.
So the first question is, how have you been able, because that was a question that somebody asked Professor Agao, and also he did justice to it. But to you, you are more like a practical example of that question now. So how have you been able to shift your cap when it's time to, how have you been able to do that, balancing things?
Definitely, if you're 100% devoted to composition, you're going to do more work, you're going to make more progress. But I need to feed, I need to have, so I've been teaching, like most of you. But my first set of serious compositions were the studies in African pianism. If you look at that score, Akinyuba was the person that I was having in my mind. So you see the usual thing: a tonal language, interfacing, rhythmic periodicity, with elements of folk songs. Some of the songs are folk songs that I will translate into an atonal pitch system. So that was there. It has received some significant performance. I remember Leeds African University staged a concert of some of the pieces many years ago. But the works from the book were actually premiered in London during one of Akinyuba's intercultural series when Glenn Inanga performed Elisami. Yeah, so performances here and there. So I've been doing that. When I got to, and then of course the 3 Yoruba songs, Oba Mimo, Mafi Wasile, I think some of you know that.
I think Refonda published that. It's on sale actually there.
Yeah. So they were published at the same time, the piano works, Then when I got to, so I lost my job in Ilorin. I don't know, many of you know the Unilorin 49. We were sacked because we were on strike. And for almost 10 years, we lost our job. But during that time, I got a fellowship appointment at Harvard University, 1-year appointment. We are not supposed to know those who write for us, but somebody here wrote for me. Akinyuba wrote for me. So the two of them wrote brilliantly for me. I got the fellowship. It was a big one because about 700 people who apply, only about 50 people will get it. I was the first Nigerian to get it. So that took me to Harvard University. And at Harvard, I wrote a piece titled Ikogusi, Ikogusi, which was premiered by members of the other fellow members, a cellist and a pianist, and it was premiered there at Harvard University, So I always look for, little opportunity to do something, but the big one came when I got my job. My present job is, if you look at the title of my professorship, is Hammond Douglas 5 College Professor. So I hold a joint appointment with 5 institutions. That doesn't mean I get paid 5 salaries. So my office is located at Mount Holyoke. That's why you keep seeing email Mount Holyoke. So Mount Holyoke, Hampshire, Amherst, Smith, and the University of Massachusetts. So if you go to all their websites, you see my photos there. But at the interview for the job, I had put in that interview that I did operas at Ilorin. So one of the questions was, so Dr. Omojola, when you come here, will you be able to do operas? I was looking for a job. Will you say no? I said yes. So that was how they commissioned me every 3 years to write an opera. And I'm so lucky because many orchestra conductors will say, well, I have my own program, that kind of thing. But the orchestra conductor said, we did the first one, he liked it. So any time I'm ready to do another opera, the orchestra is there for me. That's a rare opportunity that people have. Usually when I'm composing, I'm thinking about my students, and I'm writing those works. We do bring professionals to do the solos, the chorus, and then orchestra, students, and professionals. So there's a little dynamic to what I do. So I've been managing to keep my compositional aspirations alive. The most ideal would be for me to be not doing any other thing, but as I said, I need to feed. And my wife is there, you want to be doing composition, what are we going to eat?
Wow, thank you so much, Prof. Yeah, that's on artistic level, yeah. But there's something you mentioned about the Ilorin case now. I think this is very important. I'm going to ask simply because there are many students, imagine early career scholars, who might follow that path also, So there's I think perhaps I could be wrong, and I'm happy you can correct me today. There's there are component of political, activism, in your early, let me say in the early part of your career, let's say the Ilorin years, let's put it that way, if we were to categorize, in the Ilorin years or the Nigerian scholarly era that you work, you had some important political positions up to level of ASU. Can you tell us how were you able to manage artistic? And I remember clearly you were also the organist at your church very popular church for at that time because there's a particular chorus. I don't know this name, but I sang it a long time ago in the choir. So in that particular piece you wrote for the choir festival, and you were the chief organist and everything, of course. So you were active as a performer, as a music director, as a creative person, composing opera also. You were also active as a scholar. Then what again? Then you were also very, very political in terms of the academic space. How were you able to manage that?
Well, I mean, the activism part came accidentally, you know. I was the vice chairman of ASU, Tilorin, and we decided to go on strike. It was a national strike, so we went on strike, the entire university. But over time, the university stopped salaries of members, so people started dropping from the strike. I need to buy tire for my car. I need to pay my students. You remember that fella song? I know you, you know. People will look for excuses to, you know, but I stayed on the strike, and we got sacked. Looking back now, it was good I was sacked. I wouldn't have gone to Harvard. So I was also the head of the department at some point. I was writing basically, so that piece came from a cantata that I wrote. I don't know even where the score is now, but I managed to get that piece published. So yes, I was doing all these things all together, like most of you do, right? I'm looking at Kayode Moronfola. You know, we're always doing multiple things, you know, when we're in Nigeria. But I think the most successful composers are those who are able to devote time to just doing that. But as I said, it also has its consequences, you know, yeah.
So from my side, perhaps this will be the last one from my side, and then we'll open to everyone for the general mentorship section. So in the last 30 years, if we look at the way things were in terms of performance culture, even the political landscape in Nigeria has evolved radically, significantly in the last 30 years. So if you were to write that book today, what and what would you add or not add?
Yeah, I'm not likely to write that book again. The things that I will add will be part of this other big project that I'm doing.
Okay.
But I think one major thing that happened was Muson.
Okay.
Muson was created in Ayo, you should know, where's Ayo? When was Muson? Oh, okay. Muson was actually, that was one of the points that
1988,
1983.
83, okay.
Yeah. Prince Charles came all the way from England to come and commission the building. So that created a new space, a space that did not exist before. And I think that helped to stimulate, you know, they also run schools there. They are not bothered by the bureaucratic politics of conventional universities. They're able to do their things. They had significant funding. They were bringing orchestras from abroad. What's the name of this pianist that people have been talking about? Rebecca came to,
recently.
She came to Muson. Glenn Inanga came to Muson. So I think that created a new space. So that was a kind of a symbol of identity for those of us who practice art music, either as composers or as performers. So that helped a lot. Many of the people that we are seeing in the US today, either as especially as singers, they came via Muson. The lady that took the solo part that we saw yesterday, Miracle Obo, came from Muson. Even the guy that did the King,
Joseph Okwan, okay.
Yeah, came, you know. So I want to acknowledge the role of Muson, you know. So I think that basically what has happened. As I said before, we have a wider template of composers. It's a bigger thing. I think what the challenge will be how to cover the diverse nature of compositional experiments without without reducing the quality of the choices you're making, in a new book. And people, I think people should write. And when we write, we should try to publish not, because when I was in Lawrence, some people take their book to Aguaba, Tawamaliki Publishing Company.
It came a super.
Then they will publish the book. When you publish provincially, you exist provincially. But when you publish, the reason Professor Agawu is famous today, of course, in addition to his expertise, is because he doesn't just publish anywhere. He goes for Oxford. So once you have an Oxford, then people will read your book. So IFRA somehow became popular because it's a French thing. That's one of the reasons that book is, which one is my microphone now? Okay. that was the reason why that book is popular. People are reading it all over because IFRA is, to a certain extent, so I would like to encourage people to do that. Bode Omojola did that one many years ago. Let's have new books on Nigerian art music and try to reflect the diversity that defines that tradition. Yeah.
I think just based on what you just explained now, particularly where location, positionality in terms of publication is very key. And not only key to personal development as scholars, also key for the entire ecosystem to develop collectively. So what would you say, particularly, this is not me asking you to address Nigerian music scholarship, but if you were to advise or access in the last 30 years, the way, let's say like 20 years, for instance, or 25 years when you left this system here, in terms of music scholarship, now to compare, and now what would be your take, or, okay, just in terms of advice, what would you advise, particularly who are here, to focus on? Yeah. In terms of, you mentioned publication, what are other things that you can lay down for them to choose from to get?
Yeah, I think there is significant, excellent scholarship going on across Nigeria. I mean, I've seen essays written by people from the various universities, excellent qualitative work going on, and so on and so forth. I think my advice would be that the government should provide more funding to help people have access to the resources they need so that they can do even better job. The fantastic scholars all over Nigeria, so I have to say that. Of course, Organ House is excellent. When we came out of Dr. Oguyemi's group, the band, right? We came from that where they were singing, and then we came out within seconds. So I told Kofi, I said, there is no other place in the world where you can experience this diverse nature of music within a limited space. I'm not saying that other universities don't bring drummers or whatever, but within a little space, and then we heard Akinla here, and then, so this is fantastic. This is fantastic, and we see talent, and high-level quality, So, and I think this has to do because of the support that the university is getting from the chancellor, from the vice chancellor, from everyone. You're able to build a place with excellent acoustic. So other universities, it's not because they are not good. No, they are fantastic as well. It's just that they need support, they need funding so that they can also do the kind of things that people are doing here. And I'm not in any way suggesting that they are not doing it. I'm just saying that they could do a lot better. And as I said, there are fantastic scholars spread across Nigerian universities. Yeah.
Okay, let's round it up with this one. Then we'll move for everyone. So, Prof, you've been able to balance, you can say almost some important component of scholarship across board, bring them within one, bring us, you wrote about Yoruba identity in 20th century, your 2012 publication, very fantastic. So you've focused on Fela Showande, some fantastic analysis of the work. Then you also talk about indigenous music, popular music. Yeah, like I said earlier, you are a kind of, you provided layers of templates that people can negotiate. Now, what is that one word or two words of advice for early career scholars or emerging scholars or aspiring scholars in Nigeria that they should hold on to in their journey?
Yeah, I think that please try and write a good PhD thesis. A good PhD thesis. If it is solid, all those things you are saying, Fela Showande here, or show music there, I told you how my thesis was both ethnographic in terms of the research and also analytical. So, and when I got this new job, I brought to those 5 institutions a new positionality regarding ethnomusicology. So it's no longer the old-time ethnomusicology where you couldn't discuss new works and so on and so forth. So the varied nature of my research has to do with the kind of PhD thesis that I wrote. All I need to do is to bring something out, expand it, that kind of thing. There was recently, I think about a year ago or two, when some group of people decided to do a special edition on Professor Agawu's The African Imagination in Music. And so I was selected, so like 5 of us, a professor from Harvard, and then we all wrote, So I went back to these composers, and as a way of responding to Professor Agawu's book, I looked at some quotations in that book and used them as a basis for writing my own essay. And then, even based on some of his own discussions, and in Kewi's discussion, I then came out with what I'm theorizing as melorhythmic polyphony. You can see that melorhythm is from Making Zewi, but there's a sense in which we could talk of a kind of a harmonic culture that emanates from the layering and the overlapping of melorhythmic instruments, so that you are hearing a sense of harmony, but it's a kind of melorhythmic polyphony. So even for that project, I had to go back to that thesis. I'm not saying that when you've written your thesis, don't do anything again. I'm just saying that there is a sense in which, you said one word, right? So good, it can't be one word, something like discipline. Let's say discipline. Discipline in ways that, look, everybody will get their PhD. Don't worry, you get your PhD. So don't rush to get it with poor work. You will get it. People who are not as good as you, they've gotten it. People who are better than you, they've got. So why will you not get it? Don't be afraid. You'll get it. But do quality work. So discipline at whatever you are doing, whether it's at a master's degree level or at a PhD degree level, and you are not just thinking about a kind of a transactional thing. You're thinking about qualitative knowledge, improving your depth of knowledge, your ability to read. Professor Agawu was telling you how to read articles. There are some articles that you read. Some of the articles that I've read, when you read it once, you'll be asking yourself, do I speak English? Yeah. But when you read it second time, so, okay, it will be sounding like pidgin English when you read it second time, right? And then the third time, you see what these people are talking about. You feel so relaxed and liberated. So don't rush. Don't just go and look, introduction, conclusion. Omojola says, pew, pew. You've read that thing. Agawu says, No, read it thoroughly. Try to get a sense of the argument. What is this person saying? And you need time to do that, So discipline will be the key word to summarize what I've just said.
Thank you so much. Can we give it a applause? you.